Let's try this out on exercise number 6, and we'll go over to Excel in a moment. But here I just gave, by way of reference, the standard form for the two-product formula cost function. And here we have a specific that we will then ask questions about. Those questions are there cost complementaries? And the second is, are there economies of scope? And then the follow-up question on, if firm A is considering selling the subsidiary that made product 2 to another company, call it firm B, what would happen? What would happen to the cost of firm 1, and what would happen to the overall cost of producing goods 1 and 2? So let's go over to Excel and do this problem. Here we see the problem stated on the left, and I just copied here, just again for easy reference, the general form and then our problem. So do cost complementaries exist? Remember, the way to determine this is look at the term A, right? Term A is right here. Is the term that's sitting in front of Q1, Q2, and it's a negative 0.5. So since it's less than 0, it's yes, because A is less than 0. In other words, it's negative. And the net effect is that because it's negative, the multiplication of Q1 and Q2 will drive down the cost. That's the indicator of cost complementaries. Next is we'll see, do we have economies of scope? And here's the rule that we use to determine if economies of scope exist. So let's just do the formula. Equals F, and in this case, F is equivalent to 100, so that's 100, minus 0.5 times Q1, which is given at 5, and Q2, which is given at 4, and the answer is greater than 0, so therefore the answer is yes, there are economies of scope. And the cost before and after. So let's start with the original. So the cost of making 5 and 4 equals 100 minus 0.5 times 5 of good 1 and 4 of good 2 plus good 1, which is 5 raised to the second power, plus Q2, which is 4 raised to the second power, and that is our cost, right? So this is for firm A making both. Now, what would happen now if we sold off to firm 2? What would happen to our manufacturing? So we're doing 5 and 0, and that equals, still we have 100 minus 0.05 Q1, Q2. So Q1 is 5 and Q2 is 0. And then to that we add Q1 squared, which is 5 squared, plus 0 raised to the power of 2, which we know is 0. And that leads to 125. I'll just copy it here so you can see the formula. What is the cost of the second firm, firm B? They're going to make 0 of product 1, and they're going to pick up and do 4 of product 2. So in their case, the cost equals 100 minus, it's going to be something multiplied times 0, so we skip that. Q1 is 0, so 0 squared, and plus Q2, which is 4 squared. So it's 116. Now we see that the total, so this is for making product 1, and this is making product 2. So the total cost is equal to the sum of 116 plus 125. So what's going to happen is that we only save, if we're firm 1, we only save $6 by not making product 2. And furthermore, system-wide, our cost will be 240 versus 131. So the system-wide cost is going to be higher, totaling 241 versus 131 if firm A made both. So in this case, there's no real reason for this to happen from an economic standpoint. So chapter 5, summarizing our learning objectives, we saw the production function, which shows the production as a function of the inputs, And then we also saw the role of the manager, which is to minimize cost. And that is often to pay very close attention to which inputs are chosen in order to produce the desired quantities. The second learning objective were on mathematical forms. We saw three versions: linear, Leontief, and Cobb-Douglas. And those can be put into isoquants, where for a given amount of quantity, we see the combinations of labor and capital that generate those quantities. The third learning objective is on the cost side, the ISO costs, to see what are the costs that are required in order to make certain combinations of labor and capital. Fourth, we looked at the interaction between isocost and isoquant, such that we can determine the optimal combination of inputs to manufacture a certain desired quantity, and also look at what would be the impact if we had a change in the cost that were available to us, or a change in the pricing of one of the inputs. Fifth learning objective were cost classifications: fixed costs, sunk costs, variable costs, and marginal costs. And we saw their behavior over time and in quantities. And finally, we saw the economies of scope and cost complementarities for multiple products, where we could see if two products actually make the cost structure lower and more advantageous for the firm than simply doing one product as opposed to both products. That's it for Chapter 5, and I'll see you for Chapter 6.